I did something very bold, something that no woman had ever done in Sri Lanka. I told a joke. I got heckled by Buddhist extremists, screaming in press conferences, "Stone this whore to death." Only thing that got me through was something my boyfriend told me. Be grateful that you're alive, because people have been killed for far less in this country. Hi. Usually, I'm used to being the only person in a room that has ever been arrested. But this room, I believe there has to be few other borderline criminals. Show of hands if you have been arrested, but not for possession of coke or indecent exposure. No one? Hi. How long were you in prison? Just few days, okay. I was in prison for 39 days because I did something very bold, something that no woman had ever done in Sri Lanka. I told a joke and got arrested for it. Apparently, I was a national security threat, and I was questioned for 20 hours at the criminal investigation department because they couldn't believe that women could write jokes. It took me 20 hours to convince them that I write my own jokes, no one else was behind it, and women actually can have thoughts on their own and are capable of delivering jokes, not just babies. So the officers who interrogated me enjoyed it so much. By the time I was sent to prison, I was actually relieved. Because at least in prison, I didn't have to explain my jokes. Just had to explain my crimes, which was harder. Because everyone had their own idea about what my crime was. Making sex jokes, not being funny, being a woman, destroying Buddhism. But my biggest crime was having higher expectations of Sri Lanka. The live show in question happened 2 years ago on April Fool's Day, and it went without any problem. Just laughter, no heckling. But the real punchline came months later when a video went on YouTube. That's when it all started. I got heckled by Buddhist monks. Normally, comedians get heckled by drunk guys screaming, "You are not funny." I got heckled by Buddhist extremists screaming in press conferences, "Stone this whore to death." Buddhist extremists sounds oxymoronic, but they do exist, unlike the climate crisis. So, Sri Lanka has the oldest Buddhist lineage, so we pride ourselves as the nation that protects Buddhism. We are so busy protecting Buddhism, sometimes we forget to practice it. Kind of like the people who dedicate their entire lives to protect free speech, but never shut up long enough to actually listen to someone else. So I was arrested under the ICCPR Act, which was meant to implement United Nations International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights on a national level, which means this is a law that is meant to protect civil and political rights of individuals. But what happened instead was it was misused, and I was arrested for propagating war or advocating national, racial, religious hatred that incites hate and discrimination, violence, and hostility. With these allegations, I sound like a prime minister who commits genocide. But in really, all I did was made some sex jokes because I was sexually repressed thanks to my upbringing, which happened to be Buddhist. So my threesome joke was a bigger national security threat than the suicide terrorist bomb attacks in Sri Lanka. I became a national sensation, dominated national news, was turned into memes, got called by many names. The woman who defamed Buddhism, that vile woman, that slut. But what makes me most uncomfortable is being held as a champion for free speech. Honestly, I relate more to the slut than the free speech fighter. Going to prison for a joke and then being hailed as a free speech fighter, it's like getting struck by lightning and then being praised for inventing electricity. And then being invited to give a speech on the value of electricity. Honestly, I am a little confused about being here. The more I try to understand free speech, the more confused I get. Especially when I try to understand free speech by following what is happening in USA, the land of the free. At this point, free speech debates sound like two drunk guys having arguments over which came first, the chicken or the egg. No one wins, just keep going in circles. If you tolerate intolerance, society becomes intolerant. If you don't tolerate intolerance, you're still intolerant. Just intolerant of intolerance, which technically makes you tolerant, which is intolerable. So the only way to win is to shut up. But that's censorship. And if you don't shut up, you either get cancelled or you get shot, depending on which online gang you piss off. The ones with hashtags or the ones with guns. At least in Sri Lanka, I got to live. I know, my bar for rights is very low. I'm just happy to be alive. When I was in prison, I thought that was the worst thing that could happen to me. Only thing that got me through was something my boyfriend told me. Be grateful that you're alive, because people have been killed for far less in this country. Now I feel like getting to live is a luxury. But as an accidentally appointed free speech advocate, I try to live up to my title. I even keep my comment section open. So when I get roasted, or when people post essays on how they want to punish me sexually, I don't freak out. I feel civic pride. I feel like it's my duty to protect their freedom to express their opinion. I have unlocked another dimension of free speech when I hear Buddhist monks call me cunt, ho, and when they post my address online and ask to gang rape me. I feel like all I want to do is to make sure that nothing stifles their free speech. Not even enlightenment should get in their way. My comedy special should be named Roasted by Monks. Now, when I go to therapy, I don't talk about my feelings. I talk about strategy, how to build the mental muscle so I can protect everyone's free speech. Before the arrest, I used to tell myself, not all thoughts are valid. After the arrest, now I tell myself, all speech is valid. Where's Jacob? Hi. You know what the future of the free speech should have? Free therapy. Or like compulsory 3 deep breaths before expressing. Or is that censorship? So years ago, I used to be a nurse. Not for very long, though, because I realized I wasn't very good at it. I was always assigned to a palliative care ward, and I am someone who believes laughter is the best medicine. So I ended up spending more time talking to my patients than taking care of them. And they loved me. They kept asking for me because I made them laugh. Some of them laughed all the way to the end. Some of them laughed to death. One thing my time as a nurse taught me is when people lash out, it's almost always because they are in pain, they're hurt, they're scared, and they have the emotional regulation skills of a 4-year-old, which is basically the whole world right now. The world is a preschool, and everyone is a cranky toddler. And what's the point of free speech if nobody hears you because they are scared and hurt? We need to treat each other the same way we treat cranky toddlers. Listen to them, give them a hug, let them nap, and lower the cost of living. Because that's what most of us want. But instead, what we have is an algorithm that runs on Holy Trinity: fear, anger, hate. At one brief moment in Sri Lanka's history, I was on the receiving end of that hate. Not just me, everyone who cared about me suffered. What happened to me was a moment that showed me the worst my country could be. When I talk about what happened, it sounds like Sri Lanka is a cruel, brutal place with rogue Buddhist monks and a government that unlawfully punishes its citizens. But a country should not be defined by its worst, because the same country that punished me was also the country that lifted me. The love that shielded me from all the hate also came from the very same place. People I had never met rallying for me, strangers who hugged me, and convicted murderer aunties who made sure I ate well and slept well in my prison cell. And also people who disagreed with me but fought for my right to say what I said. Sometimes it's easier to talk about the hate because hate makes a loved story than love ever does. My country, my people, scarred by a colonization, a civil war that lasted for 3 decades, years-long political chaos. It's not hateful, it's scared, it's hurt. And sometimes hurt turns into hate. And this time, I was in the receiving end of it. So I see it as my responsibility to listen more, but never to let my hurt turn into hate, to break the cycle, to turn my hurt, pain, and fear into silly little jokes and throw them back only with love and compassion, maybe sprinkled with my unresolved sexual frustration. The price of laughter in a world full of scared and hurt people is sometimes imprisonment. But we shouldn't stop laughing. Prison was horrible. And the public shaming was worse. But I will not stop making jokes, because sometimes someone has to get struck by lightning. Thank you.